A Werewolf Shifter Romance. Written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Silent Tears. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Hale mansion, casting golden patterns across the marble floors that Clara Whitmore had been scrubbing for the past hour. Her knees ached despite the padding beneath them, and her hands were raw from the industrial cleaner that smelled sharp enough to burn her nostrils. 3 months she had worked here, and still the scent of wealth and power made her stomach twist with discomfort. She knew what lived in this house. Not just the alpha billionaire who commanded respect with a single glance, but the supernatural world that hummed beneath the surface of normalcy. The Loba who had raised her in the shelter had taught Clara early about shifters, about the hierarchies and customs that governed their hidden society. She had even whispered of an ancient law, one that allowed a single bite to bridge 2 worlds, though such bridges were rarely crossed without a price. That knowledge had saved her life more than once, teaching her when to keep her eyes down and her presence small. Clara straightened, pressing a hand against her lower back as she surveyed the gleaming floor. The second-story hallway stretched before her, silent except for the distant hum of activity from the lower levels. She gathered her supplies, the bucket handle cold against her calloused palm, and moved toward the next section of her assigned route. The playroom door stood slightly ajar. Clara paused, her instincts prickling with awareness. She had strict instructions about this room, the same as all the other staff. Clean it only when the child is elsewhere. Never engage. Never speak. The words came from Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, but everyone knew they originated from someone higher. Someone who still wielded influence despite no longer living under this roof. A sound drifted through the gap in the door. Soft, muffled, heartbreaking. Clara's chest tightened. She recognized crying when she heard it, the particular quality of a child trying desperately to muffle their tears. Her hand moved before her mind could stop it, pushing the door wider. The hinges whispered, well-oiled and silent. Inside, the playroom looked exactly as it always did. Expensive toys lined shelves in perfect rows, untouched and pristine. A reading nook sat in the corner with cushions that appeared brand new. Everything spoke of wealth and careful selection, but nothing suggested actual play or joy. Then she saw him. The boy was small for 7 years old, tucked behind a large bookshelf near the window. His dark curls fell across his forehead, and his shoulders shook with silent sobs. Tears tracked down his face, catching the sunlight and making them shine against his pale skin. His eyes were the color of amber, striking and unusual, and they held a depth of loneliness that made Clara's throat ache. She knew his name, Oliver Hale, the Alpha's son, the child the other maids spoke about in whispers when they thought no one was listening. Defective, they called him. Broken. A shame to his bloodline. The words made Clara's hands clench into fists whenever she heard them. Clara set down her bucket carefully, making no sudden movements. She had learned to be gentle with frightened things, whether they were children or wounded animals. The skills were remarkably similar. She crossed the room slowly, giving the boy time to notice her presence, to flee if he wanted. Oliver's head snapped up. His eyes widened, and his hands moved to scrub at his face, trying frantically to erase the evidence of his tears. His mouth opened, then closed. No sound emerged. Clara's heart broke a little more. She knelt in front of him, mindful of the distance between them. Then, carefully, deliberately, she raised her hands and began to sign. "Are you okay?" The effect was immediate and stunning. Oliver froze completely, his amber eyes going huge in his small face. His breathing hitched. For a long moment, he simply stared at her hands as if they had performed magic. Then, slowly, hesitantly, his own hands moved. "You can understand me?" Clara's smile came without effort, warm and genuine. She nodded and signed back. "I can. My name is Clara. What's yours?" "Oliver." His signs were careful, unpracticed, but clear. "No one ever talks to me like this. They just move their mouths and get angry when I don't answer." The casual cruelty of it struck Clara hard. She forced herself to keep her expression calm, supportive. "Well, I'm talking to you now, and I'll listen to whatever you want to say." Something shifted in Oliver's face. The wariness didn't disappear entirely, but it softened. He scooted forward slightly, closing the distance between them by inches. "Why are you being nice to me? Why wouldn't I be nice to you?" Clara signed, tilting her head. "You seem like someone worth being nice to." Oliver's lower lip trembled. His hands moved jerkily, the signs coming faster now as if a dam had broken. "Everyone else thinks I'm broken. Mom says I'm defective. She doesn't visit anymore. Dad is always working. He's too busy. I'm alone all the time." Clara wanted to gather this child into her arms and hold him until the pain faded. Instead, she kept her hands moving, kept the conversation flowing. Being different doesn't mean being broken. It means being special in a way other people don't understand yet. "Do you really think that?" Oliver's eyes searched her face, looking for deception. "I know it." Clara's signs were firm, certain. "I learned to talk with my hands because I worked with children who needed it. Every single one of them was special. Every single one of them deserved kindness and patience. That includes you." They talked for 15 minutes. Clara learned that Oliver loved books about dragons, but no one read to him anymore. She learned that he could hear everything in the house with his shifter abilities, which meant he knew exactly what people said about him when they thought he couldn't understand. She learned that his wolf had emerged when he was 5, smaller than most but perfectly healthy, and that his mother had cried when she saw it. Clara learned that this 7-year-old child believed himself to be a burden his father was forced to carry. "I can visit you during my breaks," Clara signed, watching hope flare in those amber eyes. "If you'd like that. We could talk more." "Yes." Oliver's signs were enthusiastic now, his whole body engaged. "Please. Yes. Then I will." Clara smiled. "I promise." She stood carefully, aware that she had already been away from her duties longer than was wise. Oliver scrambled to his feet, his expression brighter than when she had found him. He waved goodbye, the gesture childish and sweet, and Clara felt her heart squeeze. She turned toward the door and froze. Nathaniel Hale stood in the hallway just beyond the threshold. The Alpha himself, master of this house, and more beyond it. He was tall, imposing in a way that had nothing to do with his height, and everything to do with the presence he commanded. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone for all the emotion it showed. But his eyes were amber, exactly like his son's, and they burned with an intensity that stole Clara's breath. They fixed on her with the focus of a predator, and she felt the weight of his attention settle over her skin. How long had he been standing there? How much had he seen? Clara's pulse jumped. She lowered her gaze immediately, every instinct screaming at her to show submission to the dominant shifter. Her hands trembled as she reached for her cleaning bucket. "Come to my office." His voice was deep, resonant, carrying the undertone of command that made her body want to obey before her mind fully processed the words. "After your shift ends. Don't be late." It wasn't a request. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice, and watched as the Alpha turned and walked away. His footsteps were silent despite his size, predatory grace in every movement. She stood alone in the hallway, heart pounding, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Behind her, through the still open door, she could feel Oliver's presence. For his sake, she hoped whatever came next wouldn't separate them. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of anxiety and speculation. Clara scrubbed floors without seeing them, dusted furniture without remembering which rooms she had already cleaned. Her mind kept returning to those amber eyes, to the weight of the Alpha's stare, to the way her body had responded to his presence with a mixture of fear and something else she couldn't name. When the clock finally released her from duty, Clara's hands were shaking. She changed out of her uniform into a simple dress, washed her face, and tried to calm her racing heart. Then, with her chin lifted and her shoulders straight, she made her way to the Alpha's office on the first floor. The door was solid oak, imposing, and final. Clara knocked twice, the sound sharp in the quiet hallway. "Enter." She turned the handle and stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The office was all dark wood and leather, bookshelves lining the walls and a massive desk dominating the center. Behind that desk sat Nathaniel Hale, and the intensity of his focus hadn't diminished in the hours since she had last seen him. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Clara sat, She folded her hands in her lap to hide their trembling and waited for the Alpha to speak, to pass judgment, to decide her fate. The silence stretched between them, heavy and electric, until finally Nathaniel leaned forward and fixed her with those burning amber eyes. "Tell me," he said, his voice low and dangerous and somehow gentle all at once. "How long have you been able to speak with my son?" Chapter 2. Truths and Bargains. Clara's throat felt tight as she met the Alpha's gaze. His question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications she didn't fully understand. She swallowed hard and forced herself to answer with steady honesty. "Today was the first time," she said quietly. "I heard him crying and went to check on him. I didn't know he could sign until he responded to me." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his amber eyes never leaving her face. The intensity of his stare made her skin prickle with awareness. She could smell him now. Wood smoke and something wild that her human senses could barely register, but recognized nonetheless. Alpha. Dominant. Dangerous. "You learned American Sign Language," he said. It wasn't a question, but Clara nodded anyway. "At the shelter where I grew up. The woman who ran it was a retired shifter. She taught me about your world, how to stay safe around those with more power." Clara paused, then added carefully, "She also made sure I could communicate with all the children who came through. Some of them needed signs instead of spoken words." Something flickered across Nathaniel's face, too quick for her to identify. He stood abruptly, moving to the window behind his desk. The motion was fluid, predatory, and Clara had to fight the urge to shrink back in her chair. He stood there for a long moment, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the evening light. "As you already know, my son was born mute," he said finally, his voice rough. "In our world, in families like mine, any deviation from perfection is seen as weakness, a genetic flaw, evidence of contaminated bloodlines." His hands clenched at his sides. "Victoria, my ex-wife, she couldn't accept it. She called Oliver defective, broken. She insisted on a divorce when he was 3 years old." Clara's chest ached. She thought of the small boy hiding behind that bookshelf, tears streaming down his face because he believed himself unwanted. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "She maintains partial custody," Nathaniel continued, turning back to face her. "Not because she wants him. She made that abundantly clear. She keeps the arrangement because of the financial settlement, the generous monthly payments I provide for Oliver's care, the inheritance rights tied to shared custody. It's purely mercenary." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. Clara understood now why Oliver felt so alone, why he had been starved for simple human connection. His mother saw him as a paycheck, and his father was drowning in the weight of corporate empires and pack politics. Nathaniel moved back to his desk, bracing his hands against the polished surface. "I watched you with him today, through the door. I saw how he responded to you, how he smiled for the first time in months." His amber eyes burned into hers. "I want to hire you, not as a maid, as Oliver's companion, his tutor, someone who can actually communicate with my son and help him navigate a world that wasn't built for him." Clara's breath caught. "Mr. Hale, I don't have credentials. I'm not trained as a teacher or a therapist. I don't care about credentials." His voice carried the edge of command now, the alpha authority bleeding through. "I care about results. I saw my son happy today. I saw him understood. That's worth more than any degree." "What about the other staff?" Clara asked, her mind already spinning with the implications. "They'll wonder why I've been promoted. They might resent it. Let them wonder." Nathaniel's tone brooked no argument. "This is my house, my son, my decision." Clara studied him for a long moment. Beneath the hard exterior, beneath the alpha dominance, she could see the desperation of a father who had failed his child and was grasping at any chance for redemption. She understood that kind of desperation. She had felt it herself, watching other children in the shelter suffer while she was powerless to help. "I have a condition," she said slowly. One dark eyebrow rose. "You're negotiating with an alpha?" "I'm negotiating for Oliver," Clara corrected. "If I'm going to help him, I need you to be part of that help. 1 hour every day you spend time with him. No phones, no work, no distractions. Just you and your son. For a heartbeat, she thought she had overstepped. Nathaniel's eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising close to the surface. The air in the office grew heavy with power, pressing against her skin until it felt hard to breathe. Then, slowly, he nodded. Agreed. Good. Clara stood, her legs unsteady, but her resolve firm. Then I accept. Your salary will triple. You'll move into the East Wing near Oliver's rooms. Julian, my beta, will handle the logistics. Nathaniel pulled a business card from his desk drawer and handed it to her. Report tomorrow morning at 8. We'll discuss Oliver's needs and establish a proper schedule. Clara took the card, her fingers brushing his for the briefest moment. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, shocking in its intensity. She jerked back, and Nathaniel's eyes narrowed slightly. He had felt it too. There's something else you need to understand, he said as she turned to leave. The shifter world has laws, old laws, that govern our behavior. One of those laws allows for humans to be transformed through bite. A single wound from a shifter can change a human into one of us. Clara froze. I've heard of it. The Loba who raised me mentioned it once. Then you know that transformed humans are looked down upon. Bad blood, they call it. Tainted. Even though the law says they're technically shifters, society treats them as lesser. His voice hardened. Victoria has allies who would love any excuse to remove Oliver from my custody. You being human, working closely with my son, could give them ammunition. I'm telling you this so you know the risk. Why are you telling me this now? Clara asked, turning back to face him. Because you deserve to know what you're walking into. Nathaniel's expression was unreadable. And because if you're going to be in my son's life, you need to understand the world we live in. The politics, the prejudices, the dangers. Clara held his gaze. I understand, and I still accept. Something that might have been respect flickered in those amber eyes. Good. Then I'll see you tomorrow morning, Miss Whitmore. The dismissal was clear. Clara left the office with her head spinning and her heart racing. She had just agreed to step into a world far more complicated than scrubbing floors and avoiding eye contact. She had agreed to put herself directly in the line of fire for a 7-year-old boy who had already stolen a piece of her heart. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of new routines and small victories. Clara moved into a comfortable suite in the East Wing, close enough to Oliver's rooms that she could reach him quickly if needed. She established a daily schedule with the boy, mixing formal lessons with play, teaching him not just signs but confidence. Oliver blossomed under the attention. His smiles came more easily. His signs grew more complex and expressive. He started showing her his favorite books, his secret hiding places in the mansion, the window where he watched the moon rise at night. And true to his word, Nathaniel appeared every evening for an hour, learning signs alongside his son, rebuilding bridges that had been burned by pain and misunderstanding. Clara tried not to notice the way her pulse quickened when Nathaniel entered a room. She tried to ignore the warmth that spread through her chest when he laughed at something Oliver signed, the sound rare and precious. She told herself the growing attraction was nothing more than admiration for a father fighting to connect with his child. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. Then Victoria arrived. Clara was in the garden with Oliver, teaching him the signs for different flowers, when a black luxury car pulled up to the front entrance. A woman emerged, tall and elegant, her platinum hair gleaming in the sunlight. She moved with the fluid grace of a shifter, but there was something cold about her beauty, something sharp and calculating in the way her blue eyes swept across the grounds. Oliver's hand stilled in the middle of signing Rose. His entire body went rigid. Clara followed his gaze and understood instantly. This was his mother, the woman who had called him defective and walked away. Victoria's gaze landed on them. Her perfect features twisted into something ugly for just a moment, before smoothing back into cool neutrality. She started across the lawn toward them, her heels sinking into the grass with each step. "Oliver," she said, her voice carrying across the distance. "Come give your mother a proper greeting." Oliver didn't move. His hands trembled slightly, and Clara saw the fear in his amber eyes. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. Victoria's gaze shifted to Clara, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "And who might you be?" "Another servant who doesn't know her place. I'm Clara Whitmore," she replied evenly, keeping her voice respectful but not subservient. "I'm Oliver's companion and tutor." How quaint. Victoria's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Oliver doesn't need a companion. He has everything a child could want. Money, privilege, a proper home. What he needs is to learn to function in society despite his limitations." Clara felt fury rise hot in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Reacting would only make things worse. Instead, she signed to Oliver. "Do you want to see your mother?" Oliver hesitated, then signed back. "No, she's mean." "I saw that," Victoria snapped, and Clara realized with a start that the woman understood at least basic signs. "Teaching him to be disrespectful now, are we?" "I'm teaching him to communicate his feelings," Clara said carefully. "That's part of healthy development." Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're teaching a human lesson to a shifter child." "To my son. I wonder what the council would say about that." The threat was clear. Clara felt ice slide down her spine but kept her expression calm. She had known this job would come with complications. She just hadn't expected them to materialize quite so quickly. "Is there a problem here?" Nathaniel's voice cut through the tension. He strode across the lawn toward them. Every inch the alpha. Power radiated from him, making the air shimmer with barely contained dominance. Victoria's entire demeanor shifted, becoming colder and more formal. "I came to visit my son, and found him being influenced by your latest pet project." Clara is not a project. She's a valued member of this household, who has done more for Oliver in 2 weeks than you've done in his entire life. Nathaniel's voice was deadly quiet. "If you have concerns about his care, you can direct them to me, not to her." Chapter 3. Shadows and Whispers. The war Victoria waged was subtle at first, the kind that happened in shadows and whispered conversations. Clara noticed it in the way other staff members suddenly found reasons to leave rooms when she entered. She heard it in the abrupt silences that fell when she walked past the kitchen. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, no longer made eye contact, and the gardener who used to nod politely now turned away whenever she approached. Someone was spreading poison, and Clara knew exactly who held the vial. It started small. Supplies she needed for Oliver's lessons would go missing, only to reappear hours later in the wrong locations. Her carefully organized schedule would be disrupted by sudden demands from other staff that conflicted with her time with the boy. Once, she found her room ransacked. Nothing stolen but everything disturbed. A clear message that nowhere was truly safe. Clara understood what was happening. Victoria was building a case, collecting evidence of impropriety that didn't exist, creating a narrative of a human woman overstepping boundaries she had no right to cross. It was methodical, strategic, and terrifyingly effective. The other staff feared Victoria's connections, her power within the broader shifter community. One word from her could destroy careers, ruin reputations. They chose self-preservation over solidarity, and Clara couldn't blame them. She was alone in this, except for Oliver and the brief hours when Nathaniel joined them. 3 weeks after Victoria's garden confrontation, the tension reached a breaking point. Clara entered the staff dining room for lunch and found every table full, despite several empty chairs. No one met her eyes. The message was clear. She took her tray back to her room and ate alone, swallowing both food and humiliation. That evening, Nathaniel summoned the entire household staff to the main dining room. Clara stood at the back, trying to make herself invisible. But his amber eyes found her immediately. He stood at the head of the long table, power radiating from him in waves that made the air feel thick and heavy. "I've become aware," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "that some of you have been making my son's companion feel unwelcome. This ends now." The room fell into absolute silence. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the fear rising from the other staff members as they realized their alpha was displeased. "Clara Whitmore is under my protection," Nathaniel continued, and his eyes flashed gold. "She has done more for Oliver in a few weeks than anyone else has managed in years. Anyone who interferes with her work, who spreads rumors or creates obstacles, will answer directly to me. Am I understood?" The alpha command in his voice was unmistakable now, pressing against every shifter in the room with irresistible force. They couldn't help but respond, their wolves recognizing and submitting to the dominance. "Yes, Alpha," came the chorus of replies. "Good." Nathaniel's gaze swept the room once more before landing on Mrs. Patterson. "If you have concerns about anything happening in this household, you bring them to me. Not to anyone else, especially not to my ex-wife." The head housekeeper paled, but nodded quickly. Nathaniel dismissed them all with a gesture, and the staff fled like scattered leaves before a storm. Only Clara remained, frozen in place by the intensity of what had just happened. Nathaniel crossed the room to her, and she could see the barely controlled fury still simmering in his eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentler now, but still rough around the edges. "I knew there would be resistance," Clara said quietly. "I didn't expect it to be quite so organized." "Victoria?" The name was a growl. "She has a talent for turning people against each other, for finding weak points and exploiting them." His jaw clenched. "I should have anticipated this. You can't protect me from everything," Clara said. "And honestly, your protection just painted an even bigger target on my back. Now they'll resent me for having the Alpha's favor. Let them resent you, as long as they respect the boundaries I've set." Nathaniel's hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell back to his side. "You're important to Oliver. That makes you important to me. I won't tolerate anyone who tries to undermine that." Clara's breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. There was something there beyond simple gratitude or professional respect, something that made her skin warm and her pulse quicken. She saw the moment he realized it too, the way his pupils dilated and his nostrils flared slightly as if catching a scent he couldn't quite identify. The moment shattered when Oliver's scream pierced the air from upstairs. They both ran, Clara's shorter legs struggling to keep pace with Nathaniel's long strides. They burst into Oliver's room to find the boy thrashing in his bed, caught in the grip of a nightmare. His small hands clutched the sheets, and tears streamed down his face even though his eyes remained closed. Clara reached him first, sitting on the edge of the bed and placing gentle hands on his shoulders. "Oliver," she said softly, "wake up, sweetheart. It's just a dream." His eyes flew open, wild and frightened. For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize her. Then focus returned, and he threw himself into her arms, his small body shaking with sobs. Clara held him close, one hand stroking his hair, murmuring wordless comfort. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, his expression torn between helplessness and something that looked like agony. Clara met his eyes over Oliver's head and gestured for him to come closer. He hesitated, then moved to sit on the other side of the bed. Oliver's sobs gradually quieted. Clara pulled back enough to sign, "What did you dream about?" His hands trembled as he signed back. "Mom." She was yelling that I'm broken, that I ruin everything, that Dad wishes I was never born. Clara's heart shattered. She looked at Nathaniel and saw the same devastation written across his face. His hand reached out, hovering uncertainly near Oliver's shoulder, as if he had forgotten how to touch his own son. "That's not true," Clara signed firmly. "Your father loves you very much. So much that it scares him sometimes." Oliver looked at Nathaniel with hope and doubt warring in his amber eyes. Nathaniel swallowed hard, then moved his hands carefully, forming the signs Clara had taught him. "She's right," he signed, the movement still awkward but sincere. "I'm sorry I made you feel alone. I was afraid I'd hurt you more by not knowing how to help. But Clara taught me. She's teaching me how to be the father you deserve." Fresh tears spilled down Oliver's face, but these were different. He launched himself at Nathaniel, wrapping small arms around his father's neck. Nathaniel caught him, holding on with desperate strength, and Clara saw his own eyes glisten with unshed tears. "Can you stay?" Oliver signed when he finally pulled back. "Both of you? I don't want to sleep alone." Clara glanced at Nathaniel, unsure. He nodded without hesitation. "We'll stay." They settled in Oliver's room, Clara in the reading chair by the window, Nathaniel in another chair he pulled closer to the bed. Oliver curled under his blankets, his hand reaching out to hold his father's. Clara began to sign stories, her hands weaving tales of brave knights and clever princesses, of dragons who were misunderstood, and heroes who came in unexpected forms. Oliver's eyes grew heavy, his grip on Nathaniel's hand loosening as sleep reclaimed him. But still they stayed, watching over him as the night deepened outside the windows. Clara felt the weight of Nathaniel's gaze on her, and looked up to find him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Clara smiled and shook her head, signing with small movements so as not to wake Oliver. "You're doing the hard part. I'm just translating." "You're doing far more than that," Nathaniel signed back, his movements more confident now. "You gave me my son back. I don't know how to repay that." "Keep showing up," Clara signed. "Keep learning. Keep trying. That's all the payment I need." They sat in comfortable silence after that, two guardians watching over a sleeping child. Eventually, when Oliver's breathing had settled into the deep rhythms of true rest, they slipped quietly from the room. In the hallway outside, the space felt suddenly smaller. Clara was intensely aware of Nathaniel's proximity, of the heat radiating from his body, of the way his scent enveloped her, wood smoke and pine and something wild that made her want to lean closer. "Clara," he said softly, "what you said in there, about me being scared, you're right. After the divorce, after watching Victoria reject him so completely, I was terrified of getting close to Oliver again. Terrified that I would fail him the way she did, or that he would look at me the way he looked at her, with fear and disappointment. He doesn't look at you that way," Clara said. "He looks at you with hope, with love. He just needed to know you felt the same." "I do." Nathaniel's voice was rough. "God, I do. He's everything to me." They stood there in the dim hallway, the rest of the house silent around them. Clara's hand rested on the doorframe, and Nathaniel's was beside it, their fingers nearly touching. She could feel the electricity between them, the magnetic pull that had been growing stronger with every shared glance, every moment of working together for Oliver's happiness. Nathaniel's hand shifted, his pinky finger brushing against hers. The contact sent sparks racing up Clara's arm, and she saw his eyes darken in response. His hand moved again, covering hers completely, and the warmth of his skin against hers made her breath hitch. "Clara," he said again. Her name almost a question. She didn't pull away. Couldn't pull away. Every instinct she possessed was screaming at her that this was dangerous, that nothing good could come from a human woman wanting an alpha the way she was beginning to want this one. But her body didn't care about logic or consequences. It only cared about the way his thumb traced circles on her wrist, about the way his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then, footsteps echoed from the floor below, and they broke apart guiltily. Nathaniel cleared his throat, straightening to his full height. "I should check on the security reports," he said, his voice formal again, but his eyes still holding that heated look. "And you should get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him walk away, his shoulders tight with tension, and pressed her hand against her chest, where her heart hammered wildly. She was in dangerous territory now, and she knew it. But as she returned to her room and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, all she could think about was the way Nathaniel's hand had felt against hers, and the way he had looked at her, as if she were precious, as if she mattered beyond what she could do for his son. The next morning brought a new complication. Julian appeared during breakfast, his expression grim. He pulled Nathaniel aside, but their voices carried clearly to where Clara sat with Oliver. "Victoria's been talking to council members," Julian said quietly, "asking questions about the appropriateness of a human caring for a shifter child. She's building something, Nathaniel. A case of some kind. We need to be ready." Clara's appetite vanished. She set down her fork and signed to Oliver that she needed a moment, then rose and approached the two men. They both looked at her, Nathaniel with concern, Julian with professional assessment. "How bad is it?" she asked directly. Julian glanced at Nathaniel, who nodded permission. "She's being careful," the beta said, "not making direct accusations yet, just planting seeds of doubt, questioning whether it's appropriate for Oliver to be so influenced by human customs when he needs to learn shifter ways, whether having someone without understanding of pack dynamics is harmful to his development." In other words, Clara said flatly, she's painting me as a threat to his shifter identity. Essentially, yes. Julian's expression was sympathetic. The council won't act without concrete evidence of harm. But Victoria's patient. She'll wait for the right moment to strike. Nathaniel's hand clenched at his side. Then we don't give her that moment. We make sure everything Clara does is above reproach. We document Oliver's progress, his improved emotional state, his growing confidence. We build our own case. Agreed, Julian said. But you should know, there are already whispers about Clara's position here, about the amount of time you spend with her and Oliver. Some are suggesting your judgment might be compromised by personal feelings. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks as both men carefully avoided looking at her. Finally, Nathaniel spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. My personal feelings are irrelevant. My son's well-being is what matters. If anyone has concerns about that, they can bring them to me directly. Julian nodded, but his eyes held doubt. He excused himself, leaving Clara and Nathaniel alone in the suddenly too small dining room. Oliver remained at the table, his attention focused on his food, but Clara knew he could hear every word with his shifter hearing. I'm sorry, Nathaniel said after a long moment. This isn't what you signed up for. I signed up to help Oliver, Clara replied. Everything else is just noise. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. The everything else was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Chapter 4. Moonlit Promises. The weeks that followed brought changes that felt both gradual and seismic. Nathaniel's daily hour with Oliver evolved into 2, then 3. Clara watched father and son rebuild what had been broken, one signed conversation at a time. The awkwardness faded as Nathaniel's hands grew more confident, his signs more natural. He learned not just the language but the rhythm of it, the way Oliver's eyes lit up when his father asked questions instead of simply giving orders. Clara tried to remain objective, to see herself as merely a bridge between them. But objectivity became impossible when she caught Nathaniel watching her with an expression that made her breath catch, or when his hand would brush hers as they worked together on Oliver's lessons, sending electricity racing through her veins. She was falling for him. The realization hit her one evening as she watched him laugh at something Oliver had signed, his amber eyes crinkling at the corners, his whole face transforming with genuine joy. It wasn't just attraction, though that burned hot enough. It was the way he tried so hard, the way he listened with his whole body when Oliver spoke, the way he looked at his son with a love so fierce it made Clara's chest ache. Nathaniel felt it too. She saw it in the way his gaze lingered on her face, in the careful distance he maintained as if afraid of what might happen if he got too close. The air between them grew charged, heavy with unspoken words and suppressed desire. Every interaction became a dance of near touches and loaded glances, of conversations that meant more than the words being said. Oliver's 8th birthday arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Clara had spent the previous week secretly planning with the kitchen staff, decorating his room while he slept. When Oliver woke to find streamers and balloons and a pile of carefully chosen gifts, his smile could have lit the entire mansion. He threw his arms around Clara, then his father, bouncing with excitement that made him look truly childlike for the first time since she'd met him. The celebration was small and intimate, just the 3 of them. They spent the day together, playing games that Oliver chose, eating his favorite foods, reading stories in the garden as the sun moved across the sky. Clara captured the moment in her memory, knowing she would treasure it always. This was what family felt like. This sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. As evening approached, Nathaniel pulled Clara aside while Oliver was distracted with a new puzzle. They stood in the hallway, the sounds of the boys' contentment drifting from the playroom. There's something else planned for tonight, Nathaniel said quietly. Oliver's first transformation. He's ready, and the full moon will give him strength. Clara's eyes widened. That's incredible. He must be so excited. He is. But Clara, there's something you need to know. Nathaniel's expression grew serious. First transformations are sacred in our culture. Family witnesses them, celebrates them. It's one of the most important moments in a young shifter's life. I understand, Clara said, already planning to make herself scarce. "I'll give you privacy." "No." Nathaniel's hand caught her wrist gently. "I want you there. Oliver wants you there. You're part of this family now, whether society recognizes it or not." The words sent warmth flooding through Clara's chest. "Are you sure? If it's sacred." "You've earned the right to be there," Nathaniel interrupted. "More than most people connected to us by blood. But I need you to understand the risk. Victoria will likely hear about this. She's been waiting for ammunition, and a human witnessing a sacred ritual is exactly the kind of transgression she can use against us." Clara met his gaze steadily, then let her try. "I'm not abandoning Oliver on one of the most important nights of his life because his mother might throw a tantrum." Something fierce and proud blazed in Nathaniel's eyes. His hand was still on her wrist, his thumb tracing the delicate bones there. The touch was innocent, but felt anything but. Heat pooling in Clara's stomach as his scent wrapped around her. Wood smoke and autumn nights, and something uniquely him that made her want to lean closer, to bury her face in his neck and breathe deep. "You're remarkable," he murmured, and the roughness in his voice made her shiver. "Do you know that?" Before Clara could respond, Oliver appeared in the doorway, signing excitedly about the moon rising soon. The moment broke, but the heat in Nathaniel's eyes promised it wasn't forgotten. They gathered in a private clearing on the estate's grounds as twilight deepened into night. The full moon hung heavy and luminous above the trees, painting everything silver. Oliver stood in the center of the clearing, nervous energy radiating from his small frame. Clara positioned herself at the edge, giving him space but staying close enough that he could see her encouraging smile. Nathaniel knelt beside his son, hands moving in gentle signs. "Remember what we practiced. Let your wolf rise naturally. Don't force it. Don't fight it. Just feel the moon and let yourself change." Oliver nodded, closing his eyes. For long moments, nothing happened. Then his body began to shimmer, bones shifting beneath skin in ways that should have been impossible. Clara watched in awe as the boy transformed, his human shape melting away to reveal a small wolf pup with dark fur and bright amber eyes. The wolf was smaller than average, delicate-looking, but perfect. He yipped and spun in circles, clearly delighted with himself. Nathaniel shifted as well, his transformation swift and powerful, becoming a massive wolf with midnight fur. He nuzzled his son, pride evident in every movement. Clara couldn't stop the tears that spilled down her cheeks. This was magic, pure and beautiful, and she felt privileged beyond measure to witness it. Oliver bounded over to her in wolf form, tail wagging furiously. She knelt and ran her hands through his soft fur, laughing as he licked her face with puppy enthusiasm. The moment was perfect, which meant, of course, that it couldn't last. Within 3 days, Victoria had called an emergency meeting of the Shifter Council. Julian delivered the news with grim efficiency, his expression tight with controlled anger as he briefed Nathaniel in the study. Clara stood nearby, guilt churning in her stomach. This was her fault. She should have refused to attend the transformation, should have known Victoria would find out somehow. "She's claiming that Clara's presence at Oliver's first shift was a violation of sacred tradition," Julian explained. "That allowing a human to witness such an intimate ritual shows a fundamental disrespect for shifter culture and calls into question your judgment as a father." "My judgment as a father has never been better," Nathaniel growled low, his eyes flashing gold. A warning, not just to her, but to the entire room that she had gone too far. Oliver is thriving. Any member of the council with eyes can see that. "They can," Julian agreed. "But Victoria's not arguing about results. She's arguing about propriety, about whether a human should have this much influence over a shifter child, especially one from a prominent family like yours." Clara found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Maybe I should step back, take a less visible role, if my presence is causing problems." "No." Nathaniel's word was absolute, carrying the weight of alpha command. "You're not stepping back from anything. I'll handle the council." The meeting took place 2 days later. Clara wasn't allowed to attend, wasn't permitted to defend herself or explain. She could only wait at the mansion with Oliver, both of them tense and worried. while Nathaniel faced Victoria's accusations. He returned hours later, his expression dark but triumphant. Julian followed close behind, and Clara could read the outcome in both their faces before either man spoke. She lost, Nathaniel said simply. The council ruled that, as alpha of my territory, I have the right to determine who witnesses family rituals. They can't remove Oliver from my custody based on my choice of companions. Relief made Clara's knees weak, but Nathaniel's expression warned her there was more. However, he continued, the council issued an ultimatum. I can keep you in the household. I can let you continue working with Oliver. But if I pursue a romantic relationship with you, if I formally court you as shifter tradition dictates, it will be seen as a betrayal of our culture. An alpha choosing a human over eligible shifter females sends a message that could damage my standing in the community. The words hit like physical blows. Clara forced herself to nod, to accept what she'd always known deep down. Whatever attraction existed between them, whatever feelings were growing, they could never be acted upon. The price was too high. I understand, she whispered. It's fine. I'm here for Oliver anyway. Nothing else matters. Nathaniel's eyes burned into hers. It matters to me. He turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing in the foyer with her heart breaking and Julian watching with sympathetic eyes. She excused herself quickly, needing to be alone, needing to process the sharp ache of a future that would never exist. She found herself in the garden as night fell, sitting on a stone bench beneath the stars. The moon was waning now, no longer the brilliant orb that had witnessed Oliver's transformation, but still beautiful in its imperfection. Clara wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to cry. Footsteps approached from behind. She didn't need to turn to know it was Nathaniel. His scent announced him, that intoxicating blend of wild things and safety that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Clara, he said, and her name was a prayer, a plea, a promise. She stood and turned to face him. He stood silhouetted against the mansion lights, tall and powerful, and looking at her as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. I've spent the last few hours thinking about what the council said, Nathaniel began, moving closer. About choosing between my standing in the community and what I want, and I've made a decision. Clara's heart hammered. Nathaniel, don't sacrifice your position for you? He closed the distance between them, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that belied his strength. Clara, you gave me back my son. You made me remember what it means to be human underneath the alpha, to feel something besides responsibility and duty. You walk into every room and make it brighter just by existing. How could I not choose you? The council can challenge me if they dare. His thumb stroked her cheekbones, and she felt herself trembling. I'm done hiding what I feel. Done pretending I can keep you at arm's length. I want to court you, Clara Whitmore. I want to show the entire shifter world that you are mine, and I am yours. I'm human, she whispered, even as hope bloomed painful and fierce in her chest. I can't give you what a shifter mate could. You've already given me everything that matters. His forehead pressed against hers, his breath warm on her lips. Say yes. Say you feel this too, this pull between us that gets stronger every day. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on as if he might disappear. I feel it, she admitted. God, Nathaniel. I feel it so much it terrifies me. His smile was beautiful, transforming his usually serious face into something that stole her breath. Good. Fear means it matters. Then he kissed her, and Clara's world tilted on its axis. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't want gentle. She'd spent weeks denying this, suppressing the want that built with every glance, every accidental touch. Now, with permission finally granted, she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing she'd been hiding. Nathaniel groaned against her mouth, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pulled her closer. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, speaking of desire and need and promises that would reshape both their lives. Clara clung to him, drowning in sensation, in the taste and scent and feel of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the moon hung above them like a witness, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers again, his eyes molten gold. "Tomorrow," he said roughly. "I'm announcing to everyone who matters that I'm courting you. That you're mine." "Yours," Clara echoed, testing the word and finding it perfect. "And you're mine. Always," he promised, and kissed her again beneath the stars. Victoria's downfall came quietly. Whispers of her manipulation spread after the hearing, and Pax that once courted her influence began to turn away. For the first time, the queen of polished cruelty found herself alone. Chapter 5. Shattered Glass. The romance that bloomed between Clara and Nathaniel was a secret wrapped in stolen moments. Morning coffee in the kitchen before Oliver woke, their fingers brushing as they passed cups. Evening walks through the garden after the boy slept. Conversations that lasted hours under stars that witnessed their growing bond. Kisses hidden behind closed doors, desperate and hungry, speaking of a need neither could fully satisfy. Clara had never felt anything like this. The pull toward Nathaniel was magnetic, overwhelming, consuming. When he touched her, the world narrowed to just the two of them. When he looked at her with those burning amber eyes, she forgot every reason why this was dangerous. She was falling, had already fallen, was drowning in feelings that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Nathaniel's wolf recognized her now. She could see it in the way his eyes flashed gold when she entered a room, in the possessive way his hand found the small of her back, in how his scent wrapped around her, until she carried traces of wood smoke and autumn nights on her own skin. He was claiming her in small ways, leaving his mark even though they couldn't make it official. Oliver flourished in the warmth of their growing family. His signs became more complex, his confidence growing daily. He laughed more, played more, trusted more. When Clara tucked him in at night, he would sign that he loved her, and she would sign it back with a full heart. The three of them were becoming something real, something precious, which made what came next hurt all the more. Julian appeared one morning with news that made Nathaniel's entire body go rigid. Clara watched from where she sat with Oliver at the breakfast table as the beta pulled the alpha aside, his expression grim. "We have a problem," Julian said quietly, though Clara's human ears caught the words anyway. "Victoria has a new boyfriend, Marcus something, from the Northwood Pack. They're planning to marry within the year." "Good for her," Nathaniel replied coldly. "Maybe she'll finally leave us alone." "That's not the issue." Julian's jaw tightened. "If she remarries without maintaining custody of Oliver, she loses the monthly payments and his inheritance rights. All of it reverts solely to you. She stands to lose millions." Understanding dawned in Nathaniel's eyes. "So she's going to fight harder to keep custody. Use whatever ammunition she has." "Exactly. And Nathaniel, there's something else." Julian pulled out a thick folder of legal documents. "I've been researching ancient shifter laws, looking for anything that might help us if she escalates. I found something. An old provision that allows humans to be legally recognized as shifters if they're transformed through a mating bite. It's technically valid, though it's rarely used because transformed humans face severe discrimination." Clara's blood went cold. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but now she couldn't unhear what Julian had revealed. "No," Nathaniel said immediately, his voice hard as stone. "Absolutely not. I won't even consider that option. I'm not saying we use it," Julian said carefully. "I'm saying it exists as a last resort. If Victoria manages to build a case strong enough to threaten your custody, this could be the legal solution that removes her ammunition. Clara would technically be a shifter, eliminating the argument about human influence. And she would spend the rest of her life being called bad blood, tainted, lesser." Nathaniel's hands clenched into fists. "I won't do that to her. I won't turn her into something society will reject just to win a legal battle." Clara's heart swelled and broke simultaneously. He was protecting her even from a solution that could solve everything. She wanted to go to him, to tell him she would consider it if it meant keeping Oliver safe. But the conversation ended before she could move, Julian nodding and leaving while Nathaniel stood alone in the hallway, his shoulders tight with tension. The weeks that followed were marked by a growing sense of unease. Victoria's informant within the household, whoever they were, had clearly reported the romance to her. Clara could feel eyes watching her, could sense the walls closing in. But she refused to hide, refused to let fear dictate her actions. If Victoria wanted a war, Clara would stand her ground. The gala arrived with all the pomp and circumstance expected of shifter high society. It was a charity event benefiting children's hospitals, hosted at a glittering ballroom in the city. Nathaniel had been obligated to attend as one of the major donors, and Clara knew this would be Victoria's chance to strike publicly. She dressed carefully that evening, choosing a simple emerald dress that brought out her eyes. Nothing too flashy, nothing that would draw unnecessary attention. Nathaniel appeared in a perfectly tailored black suit that made him look every inch the powerful alpha he was, and the heat in his gaze when he saw her made Clara's knees weak. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his hand finding hers for just a moment before propriety demanded distance. "You clean up well yourself," she replied, allowing herself a small smile. Oliver stayed home with trusted staff, too young for such formal events. Clara missed his presence already, the buffer he provided between her and the judgmental stares she knew would come. The ballroom was magnificent, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors, filled with the cream of shifter society. Clara could smell the power in the air, could see it in the way people moved and interacted. Hierarchies were on display here. Dominance and submission played out in subtle gestures and careful positioning. She stayed close to Nathaniel, acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. The human, the companion, the alpha's latest fascination. She heard it all and forced herself to hold her head high, to meet curious gazes with calm confidence. Victoria appeared fashionably late, draped in diamonds and designer silk, her new boyfriend at her side. Marcus was handsome in a sharp-edged way, his eyes cold and calculating as they swept the room. Victoria's gaze found Clara immediately, and her smile was all venom. The first hour passed without incident. Clara spoke politely to those who approached, deflected invasive questions with practiced grace, and tried to ignore the weight of hostile stares. Nathaniel remained at her side when he could, his presence a steady anchor, but his position demanded he circulate and schmooze with other alphas and business associates. Clara was standing alone, sipping champagne she didn't want, when Victoria struck. "Clara Whitmore," Victoria said, her voice carrying across the nearby conversations. "How brave of you to attend tonight. I'm surprised Nathaniel allowed his son's babysitter to come to such an important event." Several heads turned. Clara set down her glass carefully. "I'm here as Nathaniel's guest," she replied evenly, "and I prefer the title of companion and tutor to babysitter." "Of course you do." Victoria's laugh was crystalline and cruel. "Tell me, does it bother you? Knowing that no matter how much time you spend with Oliver, you'll never truly be part of his world. You're human, dear. You can play house all you want, but at the end of the day, you're just the help." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. "Oliver's well-being is what matters, not titles or status." "How noble." Victoria circled her slowly, a predator stalking prey. "But we both know you're after more than just Oliver's well-being. You've set your sights on an alpha, haven't you? Hoping he'll overlook your inferior genetics for whatever charms you possess." "Victoria, that's enough." Nathaniel's voice cut through the growing crowd. He appeared at Clara's side, his presence radiating barely controlled fury. "Is it, though?" Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. "Everyone here is wondering the same thing, Nathaniel. What could possibly make you choose a human over suitable shifter mates? Is it rebellion? Temporary insanity? Or has your judgment become so compromised that you can't see what a liability she is? My personal life is none of your concern." Nathaniel growled low, his eyes flashing gold. A warning, not just to her, but to the entire room that she had gone too far. "It becomes my concern when it affects my son." Victoria's voice rose, theatrical and perfectly pitched to reach every ear in the room. "You're so busy playing happy family with your little human pet that you're forgetting what Oliver needs. He needs to learn shifter customs, shifter values. He needs a proper Luna, not some maid who taught him to use his hands because she can't understand his wolf." Clara's nails bit into her palms. Every word was carefully chosen, designed to wound and humiliate. She wanted to walk away, to refuse Victoria the satisfaction of a reaction. But then the final blow came. Honestly, I'm starting to think Oliver would be better off with me after all, Victoria declared, her voice dripping false concern. At least then he wouldn't be raised to believe his defect is acceptable. At least then he wouldn't become even more of a useless burden than he already is. Dead weight that only serves to drain his father's wallet and patience. The words hung in the air, ugly and unforgivable. Clara saw red. Her hand moved before her brain caught up, palm connecting with Victoria's face in a sharp crack that echoed through the sudden silence. The ballroom collectively gasped. Victoria's head snapped to the side, her perfect makeup disrupted, her expression transforming from shock to triumph in the span of a heartbeat. Clara's hand stung, her chest heaving, and she realized with cold horror what she had just done. "Did everyone see that?" Victoria's voice was shrill with manufactured distress. "She attacked me. This is the woman Nathaniel trusts with his son? Someone violent and unstable. You insulted Oliver," Clara said, her voice shaking. "You called your own son worthless. I spoke a harsh truth that needed to be said, and you responded with violence." Victoria held her reddening cheek dramatically. "Marcus, darling, please call my lawyer. I want this documented. Witnesses, all of you." The crowd murmured, some sympathetic to Clara, others clearly on Victoria's side. Nathaniel moved to place himself between Clara and his ex-wife, his body vibrating with barely suppressed rage. "You planned this," he said quietly, dangerously. "You baited her deliberately. I expressed concerns about my son's upbringing, and your companion assaulted me for it." Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "The council will hear about this. They'll hear about all of it. A human woman, violent and inappropriate, having undue influence over a young shifter. It's grounds for a custody review, Nathaniel. You know it is." Julian appeared from the crowd, his expression grim. "We should leave. Now." Nathaniel nodded once, his hand finding Clara's elbow with gentle firmness. They made their way through the gawking crowd, Clara's face burning with shame and anger. She had played directly into Victoria's hands, had given her exactly the ammunition she needed. In the car ride home, the silence was suffocating. Clara stared out the window at the passing city lights, her hand still stinging from the slap. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally. "I lost control. I gave her what she wanted. She was vile," Nathaniel replied, his voice rough. "What she said about Oliver was unforgivable. But I should have been stronger, should have walked away. You were defending my son. Our son." His hand found hers in the darkness. "I'm not angry at you, Clara. I'm furious at her for manipulating this situation, and I'm terrified of what comes next." Julian's voice came from the front seat, measured and professional. "Victoria filed a petition for a custody review within an hour of the incident. The council has agreed to hear her case. We have 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks before they decide if Nathaniel keeps full custody of Oliver or if she gets what she wants." Clara closed her eyes against the tears threatening to fall. 2 weeks to save the little boy she loved, the family she had found. 2 weeks before everything she had built might crumble to dust. Chapter 6. The Weight of Decisions. The council chamber was built to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings stretched high overhead. Dark wood paneling absorbed light rather than reflected it. And the curved table where the 5 council members sat created a semicircle of judgment that made Clara feel small and exposed. The air smelled of old leather and power, of centuries of decisions made within these walls that had shaped shifter society. Clara sat in a wooden chair that felt more like a witness stand, Nathaniel beside her radiating controlled fury. Julian sat on Nathaniel's other side, surrounded by folders of documentation and legal briefs. The lawyers Nathaniel had hired were the best money could buy, but even their confident demeanor couldn't hide the uphill battle they faced. Victoria sat across the room with her legal team, immaculate in a white suit that made her look angelic and innocent. Her blue eyes held calculated satisfaction as she watched Clara squirm under the council's scrutiny. The head council member, an alpha named Aldrich with silver hair and cold gray eyes, called the hearing to order. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "We are here to review the custody arrangement of Oliver Hale and determine whether changes are warranted based on recent events and concerns raised by his mother, Victoria Hale." The first hour was brutal. Victoria's lawyers called witnesses, staff members who Clara recognized from the mansion. Mrs. Patterson testified that Clara had been insubordinate and disruptive. A gardener claimed he had seen Clara speaking harshly to Oliver, though Clara knew it was a lie. Another maid suggested that Clara's influence was making Oliver withdrawn from other shifters, isolated and strange. Each testimony was careful, measured, designed to paint Clara as inappropriate and damaging without being obviously false. Nathaniel's lawyers cross-examined, but the damage was done. The council members took notes with expressions that ranged from disapproving to openly hostile. Julian presented his evidence next. Audio recordings he had obtained of Victoria, speaking to her boyfriend Marcus. Her voice came through clearly, admitting she didn't want Oliver, that he was merely a means to maintain her financial settlement. The recordings were damning. Her contempt for her son laid bare for everyone to hear. "Your Honor," Victoria's lead lawyer stood smoothly. "We object to this evidence. These recordings were obtained without my client's knowledge or consent. They represent a violation of privacy and cannot be admitted in a proceeding of this nature." Aldrich frowned, conferring quietly with the other council members. Finally, he spoke. "The objection is sustained. While the content may be relevant, the manner in which it was obtained is dishonorable, and beneath the standards we maintain. The recordings will not be considered in our deliberation." Julian's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. Clara felt hope slipping through her fingers like water. Without that evidence, they had nothing concrete to counter Victoria's carefully constructed narrative. Then Oliver was called. Not to speak, of course, but to present something he had prepared. A court attendant brought forward a large portfolio, and Clara's breath caught as she recognized it. Oliver had been working on this for days in secret, she realized, preparing for this exact moment. The attendant opened the portfolio on a display easel. The first series of drawings showed a small figure alone in a dark room. The next showed the same figure surrounded by shadows shaped like adults who turned away. More drawings depicted the boy crying, hiding, small and forgotten. The artwork was simple but heartbreaking, rendered with the honest skill of a child who had lived what he drew. Then the images changed. Color bloomed across the pages. The same small figure now stood beside two taller ones, their hands linked. Sunlight poured through the drawings. Smiles were sketched on faces. The final drawing showed 3 wolves running together under a full moon, stars scattered above them like blessings. Beneath the drawings were words in childish handwriting, letters formed with careful concentration. "Before Clara, I was alone. Dad loved me but was far away. Mom said I was broken. Clara taught me I'm not broken, just different. She taught Dad to talk to me. Now we are family. Please don't take her away. Please don't make me alone again." The chamber fell completely silent. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Nathaniel's hand found hers beneath the table, gripping tight enough to hurt. She saw Aldrich's expression soften, saw the female council member openly wipe at her eyes. Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her perfect composure cracking at the edges. The child's testimony, unconventional as it is, will be considered. Aldrich said quietly. "Is there anything else?" Clara stood before she could second-guess herself. "May I speak?" Aldrich nodded. "You may address the council." Clara's legs shook as she moved to stand before the curved table. 5 pairs of eyes fixed on her, judging and weighing. She took a breath and began. "I know what you see when you look at me. A human. Someone who doesn't belong in your world, who can't understand your customs or your culture. And you're right. I'm not a shifter. I'll never be one. But I understand what it means to be different, to be rejected because you don't fit the mold people expect." She forced herself to meet Aldrich's gaze directly. "I grew up in a shelter run by a retired shifter named Margaret. She taught me about your world, about hierarchy and respect, and the beauty of what you are. She also taught me that every child deserves kindness, regardless of whether they fit society's definition of perfect." Oliver doesn't speak, and some people see that as a flaw. I see it as a different way of being brilliant. I learned American Sign Language working with children who needed it. I've spent my life helping those who communicate differently, who see the world through their own unique lens. When I found Oliver crying and alone, I didn't see a broken shifter child. I saw a boy who needed someone to listen in the language he could speak. Her voice grew stronger. I don't want status. I don't want wealth. I don't want anything except for Oliver to grow up knowing he's loved and valued exactly as he is. If keeping me in his life means he continues to thrive, then fight for that. But if my presence truly harms him, then I'll walk away. I'll break my own heart if it means protecting his. Clara returned to her seat, her hands trembling. Nathaniel's eyes were bright with unshed tears as he looked at her. Is there anything else the defense would like to present? Aldrich asked. One of Nathaniel's lawyers stood, exchanging glances with Julian. Your Honor, there is one more option we would like to address. An ancient law that could resolve the legal complications regarding Miss Whitmore's human status. Victoria leaned forward, interest sharpening her features. The lawyer continued carefully. Shifter law recognizes humans who have been transformed through mating bite as legally equivalent to born shifters. If Miss Whitmore were to accept such a transformation, the objections regarding human influence would become moot. She would technically be a shifter, albeit a transformed one. No, Nathaniel said immediately, his voice hard. We're not pursuing that option. Aldrich raised his hand. Let the lawyer finish, Alpha Hale. The lawyer nodded. We understand this is considered a nuclear option. Transformed humans face significant social stigma, often referred to as bad blood or tainted. However, legally speaking, it would eliminate Victoria's primary argument. It would also make Clara a target for discrimination for the rest of her life, Nathaniel said flatly. I won't subject her to that. Aldrich studied them both with ancient eyes. The law your counsel references is indeed valid, though antiquated. It dates back to an era when transformations were more accepted within our society. Today, such individuals face considerable prejudice, as your lawyer noted. However, the decision to pursue this path is not one for this council to make. It rests with the individuals involved. He paused, then continued. This council will deliberate on the custody matter for 5 days. We will reconvene at that time for a final hearing and decision. Until then, the current custody arrangement remains in effect. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. Clara felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. 5 days. 5 days to decide if she would give up her humanity to save the family she loved. In the car ride home, Oliver sat between them, his small hand gripping Clara's tightly. He had been so brave, she thought. So much braver than many adults could have been. We're not doing it, Nathaniel said again, his voice brooking no argument. The transformation. I won't ask that of you. But if it's the only way to keep Oliver safe, Clara began. There has to be another option. Nathaniel's hands clenched on the steering wheel. I've spent my entire life watching people be judged for things beyond their control. Oliver for being mute, transformed shifters for their origins. I won't add you to that list. Clara looked down at Oliver, who was watching them both with worried amber eyes. She signed to him. Don't worry. Everything will be okay. Oliver signed back. I don't want you to leave. I don't want to lose you. You won't, Clara promised, though she had no idea if she could keep that promise. The 5 days stretched ahead like an eternity. Each one brought them closer to a decision that would change everything, a choice between Clara's humanity and Oliver's future, between accepting discrimination or accepting defeat. On the third evening, Clara found Nathaniel standing alone in his study, staring out the window at the darkening sky. She approached quietly, her heart heavy with the weight of what needed to be said. I've been thinking, she began softly. Don't, Nathaniel said immediately. Don't even suggest it. Listen to me. Clara moved to stand beside him. I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't quite belong anywhere. The Loba who raised me loved me. But I wasn't Pack. I wasn't Shifter. I was always adjacent to your world, but never truly part of it. Maybe this is my chance to finally belong somewhere completely. At what cost? Nathaniel turned to face her, anguish written across his features. You'll face hatred, Clara. Discrimination. People will look at you as lesser, as contaminated. You'll carry that burden every single day. I'll also carry the knowledge that I saved Oliver, Clara replied. That I became part of your world in the only way a human can. And maybe, just maybe, I can help change how transformed shifters are treated. Oliver's differences made him stronger once we embraced them. Maybe mine can too. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you, he whispered roughly. Either of us. You deserve someone who fights for you, Clara said against his chest. And I'm fighting, Nathaniel. I'm choosing this. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you and Oliver are worth it. Chapter 7. Moonfire. The fourth day of waiting dawned cold and clear. Clara woke before sunrise, her decision solidifying in her chest like stone. She found Nathaniel already awake in his study, papers scattered across his desk that he wasn't really reading. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and worry. I'm doing it, she said without preamble. The transformation, today. Nathaniel's head snapped up, his amber eyes wide. Clara, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She crossed the room to stand before him. Not because I'm being forced, but because this is my choice. My family. I won't lose you or Oliver because I was too afraid to change. You'll face discrimination, Nathaniel said roughly, standing to tower over her. People will treat you as lesser. Bad blood, tainted, corrupted. Those words will follow you everywhere. Let them. Clara's voice was steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. I've been called worthless before. I survived it. I'll survive this too. Nathaniel cupped her face with both hands, his touch achingly gentle. You are the bravest person I've ever known. I'm terrified, she admitted. Good. That means you understand what you're choosing. He kissed her forehead, lingering there. But if we do this, we do it properly. The mating bite isn't just transformation. It's a bond, a claiming. It means you're mine, and I'm yours, permanently and irrevocably. Heat flooded Clara's body at the possessiveness in his voice. I know. I want that. All of it. They gathered at sunset in the same clearing where Oliver had experienced his first shift. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the approaching night bringing with it a sense of ceremony and finality. Julian stood as witness, his expression solemn. Oliver watched with wide eyes, his small hand clutching Clara's tightly. She signed to him, Don't be scared. This is what I want. Oliver signed back. Will it hurt? Probably, Clara admitted. But you'll still have me after. I promise. Nathaniel stood before her in the fading light, and Clara had never seen him look more conflicted. Love and guilt warred in his expression. Last chance to change your mind, he said quietly. I won't. Clara's voice didn't waver. Transform me. Make me yours. The ritual was simple, but carried the weight of eternity. Nathaniel hesitated, trembling between love and fear. If I do this, he whispered, I could lose you if it goes wrong. Clara touched his face, smiling through tears. Then find me again. On the other side. Nathaniel shifted partially, his canines elongating into deadly fangs. Clara tilted her head, exposing the vulnerable column of her throat in a gesture of absolute trust. His breath was hot against her skin as he positioned himself. I love you, he whispered. Then he bit down. Pain exploded through Clara's body, white-hot and all-consuming. It felt like fire racing through her veins, like every cell was being torn apart and remade. She screamed, couldn't help it, and distantly heard Oliver's frightened cry. Nathaniel's arms were iron bands around her, holding her up as her legs gave out. His venom spread through her system like liquid lightning. Clara felt her human self fighting it, her body trying to reject the foreign magic forcing its way into her DNA. But Nathaniel's presence anchored her, his scent grounding her even as everything else fell apart. Time lost meaning. Clara was only dimly aware of being carried inside, of being laid on soft sheets. The transformation wasn't instant. It would take days for her body to fully change, for her human cells to give way to something new. The first 3 nights were the worst. Fever burned through her veins, delirium twisting dreams into shapes of fire and moonlight. Nathaniel never left her side, cooling her brow with trembling hands. She drifted in and out of consciousness, caught between nightmares and moments of clarity, where she found him always there, his hand in hers, his voice a constant murmur of encouragement. Oliver visited when she was lucid, his small face creased with worry. He signed questions she could barely focus on, and Nathaniel translated for her when the signs blurred together. "Is she dying?" Oliver asked. "No," Nathaniel assured him, though his scent carried the sharp tang of fear. "She's becoming. It's different." The second day brought changes Clara could feel. Her senses sharpened until the world became overwhelming. She could smell everything. The fabric of the sheets, the wood of the furniture. Nathaniel's worry, Oliver's anxiety. Sounds that had been background noise became distinct and clear. Her body ached as bones shifted subtly beneath her skin, preparing for transformations to come. The third day, the fever finally broke. Clara woke clear-headed for the first time since the bite, her body weak but functional. Nathaniel was asleep in a chair beside the bed, his hand still clutching hers. She studied his face, memorizing the lines of exhaustion, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way even in sleep he looked worried. She was different now. Clara could feel it in the way her body hummed with new energy, in the heightened awareness of everything around her. And deep inside, she felt something else, a presence that had never been there before. Her wolf, still sleeping but undeniably real. "You're awake," Nathaniel said softly, his eyes opening to meet hers. "I'm alive," Clara replied, her voice rough from screaming. "I'm changed. How do you feel?" "Different. Stronger." She sat up slowly, testing her body. "When will I be able to shift?" "Soon. The next full moon will call to you. We'll guide you through it." Nathaniel moved to sit beside her on the bed. "Clara, the final hearing is tomorrow. Can you do this?" "I have to." She squeezed his hand. "This is what we fought for." The 8th day arrived with ominous gray skies. Clara dressed carefully in a formal suit, her hands steadier than she expected. She could smell the nervous energy coming from everyone in the house. Nathaniel's determination, Julian's cautious optimism, Oliver's hopeful fear. The council chamber felt different this time. Clara's enhanced senses picked up details she'd missed before. The scent of old wood and power, the subtle sounds of breathing and heartbeats, the way the air currents moved through the vaulted space. Victoria's shock when Clara entered was palpable. Her blue eyes widened, her perfect composure cracking as she realized what Clara had done. "Impossible," Victoria breathed. Aldrich called the hearing to order, his gray eyes moving between Clara and Nathaniel with new assessment. "We understand there have been developments since our last meeting. My client has undergone transformation," one of Nathaniel's lawyers said formally. "She is now legally recognized as a shifter under ancient law. The primary objection to her presence in Oliver Hale's life has been eliminated." Victoria's lawyer stood quickly. "This is a transparent manipulation of the system. She's still fundamentally human, regardless of what she's done to her body." "The law is clear," Aldrich said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "A human transformed through mating bite is legally equivalent to a born shifter. Miss Whitmore is now Clara Hale, recognized member of the shifter community. The objections regarding human influence are therefore moot." Victoria's face twisted with fury and desperation. "This is absurd. She's contaminated, bad blood. She'll poison my son." "Your son," Nathaniel interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet, "has been thriving under Clara's care. The council has seen the evidence. Oliver is happier, healthier, and more confident than he's been in years. That's what matters, not your financial interest in maintaining custody." Aldrich consulted with the other council members in low voices. Finally, he spoke. "Based on all testimony and evidence presented, this council grants full custody of Oliver Hale to his father, Nathaniel Hale. Victoria Hale's visitation rights are suspended pending her ability to demonstrate genuine care for her son's well-being rather than financial motivation. This decision is final." The gavel fell. Clara felt tears stream down her face as Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. They had won. Oliver was safe. Victoria's scream of rage echoed through the chamber. "You can't do this! I have rights! That creature has no business raising my son!" "The decision stands," Aldrich said coldly. "This hearing is adjourned." They were escorted from the chamber by guards, moving through the formal corridors toward the exit. Clara was still processing, still trying to believe it was really over, when Victoria appeared from a side hallway. "You think you've won?" Victoria snarled, her eyes flashing with wolf gold. "You think becoming a shifter makes you worthy? You're nothing but a human playing dress-up, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." She lunged at Clara with supernatural speed, claws extended. Instinct took over. Clara's body moved before her mind caught up, blocking the attack and countering with force she didn't know she possessed. Victoria hit the marble floor hard, and Clara stood over her, breathing hard, her own wolf rising close to the surface for the first time. "Touch me again," Clara said quietly, her voice carrying an edge of alpha command she'd learned from Nathaniel. "And you'll regret it." Guards rushed forward, pulling Victoria to her feet. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her expression stunned. She had expected Clara to be weak, unprepared. Instead, she'd found someone who could defend herself. Aldrich appeared in the hallway, his expression thunderous. "Victoria Hale, you have committed assault on council property. You are hereby banned from this territory and stripped of all remaining parental rights. If you attempt contact with Oliver Hale or his family, you will face criminal charges. Remove her." Victoria was dragged away, still screaming threats, but Clara barely heard them. The fight had drained from her, leaving her shaking in the aftermath of adrenaline. Nathaniel's arms came around her, steady and strong. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe. Oliver's safe. We won." Outside the council building, Julian was waiting with Oliver. The boy saw them emerge and ran forward, throwing himself into Clara's arms with such force she stumbled. She held him tight, breathing in his familiar scent now enhanced by her new senses. "You're okay," Oliver signed frantically when he pulled back. "You're really okay." "I'm better than okay," Clara signed back. "I'm Pack now. Really, truly Pack. And we're never letting you go." Oliver buried his face in her shoulder and cried, but they were tears of relief and joy. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stood there in the gray afternoon, a family finally complete and safe. That evening, Nathaniel and Clara stood in the garden under the waxing moon. Oliver slept peacefully inside, exhausted from the emotional day. The night air was cool against Clara's skin, and she marveled at how differently she experienced the world now. "No regrets?" Nathaniel asked softly. "Not one." Clara turned to face him. "Though I won't lie, I'm scared of what comes next. Of the discrimination, the judgment. We'll face it together." He pulled her close. "And Clara, what you did today, standing up to Victoria, defending yourself, you showed everyone that transformed shifters aren't weak. You gave them something to respect." "I had a good teacher," she replied, smiling up at him. Nathaniel kissed her then, deep and claiming, a promise of forever sealed under the watching moon. When they finally broke apart, Clara rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. She had lost her humanity, but gained so much more. A family, a purpose, a place to belong. And as the moon climbed higher in the sky, Clara felt her wolf stir inside her, awakening to greet the night. Soon she would run on 4 legs instead of 2. Would hunt and howl and be truly wild. The thought didn't frighten her anymore. It filled her with anticipation, with joy, with the certainty that she had made the right choice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them as Clara Hale, mate, mother, shifter, and finally, completely, home. Chapter 8. Home. Under moonlight. 6 months had passed since the council's decision, and the world had transformed in ways Clara could never have imagined. Not just her body, though that too had changed fundamentally. Her wolf had emerged during the first full moon after her transformation, smaller than most but swift and golden brown, with eyes that maintained their human green even in animal form. Nathaniel had run beside her that night, teaching her to embrace the freedom of 4 legs instead of 2, the joy of wind in her fur and earth beneath her paws. But the deeper transformation was in how she moved through the shifter world now. No longer an outsider looking in, but a member, however controversial her path to membership had been. The discrimination Nathaniel had warned about was real. Clara heard the whispers, saw the disdainful looks from traditionalist shifters who viewed transformed humans as corrupted. Bad blood, they called her. Tainted. Lesser. The words stung, but she had learned to wear them like armor. Every time someone tried to diminish her, she thought of Oliver's smile, of Nathaniel's love, of the family she had fought so hard to keep. And slowly, grudgingly, some minds began to change. The wedding took place on a crisp autumn morning. The estate gardens transformed into something magical. White roses climbed trellises, fairy lights hung from trees despite the daylight, and chairs arranged in neat rows faced an arbor woven with wildflowers. The guest list was small but significant. Julian and other pack members who had come to respect Clara, a few shifters from neighboring territories who were curious about the alpha who had chosen a transformed mate, and the families from Clara's new project. That project had started simply. Clara had approached the community center 3 months after the custody battle, proposing a program to teach American Sign Language to shifter families who had children with communication difficulties. She had expected resistance, had braced for rejection. Instead, she found desperate parents who had been struggling alone, children who felt isolated within their own packs, families grateful for any help. The program grew quickly. Word spread through the shifter community that there was a place where differences were celebrated, where children who didn't fit traditional molds could learn to thrive. Clara taught classes twice a week, training other shifters to become ASL interpreters, creating resources for families who felt lost. One of her most dedicated students had been a quiet she-wolf named Grace. A teacher by training who specialized in special education, Julian had been helping Clara set up the program's legal structure when Grace walked into a planning meeting. The connection between them had been immediate and obvious, Julian's normally serious expression softening whenever Grace laughed, her gentle nature balancing his intensity perfectly. Now, as Clara stood in the bride's preparation room, Grace helped adjust her veil with capable hands. "You look beautiful," Grace signed, her movements fluid and natural. "Thank you," Clara signed back, then smiled. "For everything. Not just this, but for the program. For believing in it." "You gave me something to believe in," Grace replied, her eyes warm. "You showed all of us that being different doesn't mean being less. That strength comes in many forms." A knock at the door announced Oliver's arrival. He burst in wearing a tiny suit that made him look impossibly grown up, his dark curls carefully combed. In his hands he carried a small pillow, with 2 rings tied to it with silk ribbon. "Ready?" He signed to Clara, bouncing slightly with excitement. Clara knelt before him, adjusting his collar with gentle fingers. "Are you ready? This is an important job, ring-bearer. Very serious." Oliver's grin was pure mischief. "I know. Dad told me 3 times not to drop them. And will you drop them?" "Maybe," Oliver signed, then laughed silently at Clara's mock horror. "I'm joking. I'll be perfect." Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, devastating in a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and the amber intensity of his eyes. Those eyes found Clara and went molten, his scent shifting to something heated that made her wolf perk up with interest. "Everyone out," he said quietly, his voice carrying alpha command that had Grace and the other attendants filing out quickly. Oliver hesitated, looking between them, then grinned and followed the others, closing the door behind him. The moment they were alone, Nathaniel crossed the room and pulled Clara into his arms. "Having second thoughts?" he murmured against her hair. "About you?" "Never." Clara tilted her head back to meet his gaze. "About whether I deserve this happiness?" "Every day. You deserve everything," Nathaniel said fiercely. "You saved my son. You saved me. You changed an entire community's perspective on what it means to be different. And in a few minutes, you're going to officially become my mate. My Luna. My wife. I am the luckiest alpha who ever lived." Clara's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you. Both of you. This family we've built. Forever," Nathaniel promised, kissing her with gentle passion. "No matter what comes. Forever." The ceremony was simple but profound. Clara walked down the aisle alone, needing no one to give her away because she was choosing this freely, completely. Oliver preceded her, carrying the rings with solemn concentration, his small face serious until he reached the arbor where Nathaniel waited. Then he grinned and signed, "Don't cry, Dad." Nathaniel's lips twitched. No promises. When Clara reached them, Oliver stepped between them, looking up at both his parents with such pure joy that several guests openly wept. He signed quickly, his hands moving with practiced ease. "My family. Together." Finally, the efficient, a elder shifter who had surprisingly supported Clara's transformation, spoke about bonds that transcend blood, about families formed through choice and love, about strength found in accepting rather than rejecting those who are different. His words carried weight, and Clara saw more than one traditionalist shifter in the audience shifting uncomfortably, reconsidering old prejudices. When it came time for vows, Nathaniel spoke first, his voice steady but rough with emotion. "Clara, you came into my life when I had forgotten how to be anything but an alpha. You reminded me how to be a father, a man, someone capable of love rather than just duty. You saw my son's value when others saw only deficit. You chose us, again and again, even when it cost you everything you were. I vow to spend my life being worthy of that choice, to love you with everything I am, to build with you a family and a future where everyone belongs." Clara's voice shook, but held firm. "Nathaniel, you gave me a home when I had only ever been an outsider. You saw strength in me I didn't know existed. You let me love your son, trusted me with his care and his heart. I vow to stand beside you through every challenge, to be the Luna your pack deserves, to love you and Oliver with everything I am. I vow to never stop fighting for families like ours, for children like Oliver, for a world where being different is celebrated instead of condemned." They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands that caught the sunlight, and when the officiant pronounced them married, when Nathaniel kissed her with passion and promise, when Oliver threw his arms around both their legs in an exuberant hug, Clara felt complete in a way she never had as a human. The reception was joyful, full of laughter and dancing and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Julian's toast made everyone laugh, recounting his first meeting with Clara and his certainty that she wouldn't last a week in the household. "I have never been happier to be wrong," he finished, raising his glass high. As the sun set and guests began to depart, Clara found herself in the garden with Nathaniel and Oliver. The moon was rising, nearly full, calling to the wolves inside all of them. "Want to run?" Nathaniel asked, his eyes already flashing gold. Oliver's enthusiastic nodding answered for both of them. They shifted together now, the transformation as natural as breathing. Clara's golden-brown wolf shook out her fur, stretching in the pleasure of the change. Nathaniel's massive midnight wolf nuzzled her, and Oliver's smaller form bounded circles around them both, his tail wagging furiously. They ran through the estate's extensive grounds, 3 wolves moving as one unit. The night air was cool and perfect, carrying scents of earth and growing things, of prey animals and distant water. Clara's wolf reveled in the freedom, in the strength of her body, in the rightness of running beside her mate and child. They reached a clearing near the edge of the property and stopped, panting happily. The moon hung above them, luminous and watching. Oliver shifted partially, enough to use his paws in the adapted sign language Clara had invented for wolf form, simplified gestures that could be made with paws and body language. He signed, pawing the ground and positioning his body. Family. Home. Love. Nathaniel's wolf moved closer to Clara's, his larger body sheltering hers. Oliver pressed between them, safe and warm in the protection of his parents. And together, as one, they lifted their muzzles and howled. The sound echoed through the night, carrying across the territory and beyond. A declaration of belonging, of unity, of joy. Other wolves answered from the distance, the pack responding to their alpha's call, acknowledging their Luna, celebrating the family that had fought so hard to exist. As the howl faded, Clara felt tears prick her eyes even in wolf form. She had lost her humanity. Yes, the DNA that had defined her for 26 years was gone, replaced by something other. She would never age the same way, never experience the world as fully human again. That loss was real, and sometimes she mourned it in quiet moments. But what she had gained was immeasurable. She had a mate who loved her with fierce devotion, a son who looked at her with absolute trust, a pack that was learning to accept her, slowly but surely. A purpose in helping other families navigate the challenges of raising different children. A home, not just a house, but a true belonging that sank into her bones and settled her restless heart. She was Clara Hale now, Luna of the Shadowpine Pack, mother to a brilliant, brave, mute 8-year-old boy who had taught her that communication transcends voice, wife to an alpha who had chosen love over tradition, family over status, teacher to families who desperately needed someone to see their children's potential. She was a transformed shifter, yes, with all the discrimination and prejudice that label carried. But she was also proof that transformation, whether physical or social, was possible. That minds could change, that families came in many forms, and love was stronger than tradition. The 3 wolves turned as one and ran back toward the mansion, toward home. Behind them, the moon watched with approval, and ahead, warm lights promised safety and belonging. Clara's golden brown wolf ran between her 2 favorite beings in the world, her heart full to bursting, and thought that this wild, strange, beautiful life was worth every sacrifice she had made. She was home. Finally. Completely. Perfectly home. And as dawn approached, and they shifted back to human form, as Nathaniel pulled her and Oliver into his arms on the dew-wet grass, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choice 1,000 times over, because some things were worth fighting for. Some families were worth any price, and some loves transcended every boundary, even the one between human and wolf.